The great migration is over, everyone. That's at least according to new data from Redfin, which is showing some really concerning trends for the US housing market. Number one, everyone, we're seeing a decline in the number of Americans looking to relocate cities. But then more importantly, number two, a big decline in the number of people looking to buy homes in new cities. This is, of course, massive news for the US housing market because there was many parts of the country over the last 18 months that became heavily reliant on people fleeing, let's say, rich areas like New York and California, coming into a more affordable city, buying up real estate, overpaying and pushing prices up. Well, in 5 cities in particular, folks, that trend is not only slowing down, it's going completely into reverse. And in this video, I'm going to give you the data on where these 5 cities are, how much the migration is declining, because if you're a home buyer or real estate investor looking into these areas, which are pretty big, pretty substantial housing markets, which saw big run-ups in prices, I would say, I don't know, hit the pause button, because historically in the US housing market, declines in migration that occur when prices are high, not so good for the future direction. I think we could be seeing big price crashes in these 5 cities. For those of you who watch my channel consistently, you know that this migration data is extremely important in understanding housing market demand. You're going to want to know whether more people are moving into your city or leaving your city. I'm going to show you all that data in this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start things off by actually looking at the cities that saw the most inbound migration of home buyers third quarter of 2021, according to this Redfin data. And you can see that number one, everyone, is Miami. Miami in the third quarter of 2021 is seeing more inbound home buyers than any other market in America, especially in relation to how many people are there looking to leave. And we can see Miami, Phoenix, Sacramento, they top the list. They're the top 3. We go a little further down. Las Vegas and Tampa also have really strong inbound home buyer demand. And the way that Redfin comes up with this data is really interesting. It's really cool, guys. They basically take a look at how people search on Redfin. And for instance, if there's a lot of people who live outside Miami searching in Miami, they know that that's a sign that more people want to move there and buy homes. Conversely, if there's a lot of people in Miami searching outside, that likely means they want to move away. Redfin then compares the inbound and the outbound searches, filters out anyone that's not a serious home buyer. They only look at people with over 10 homes searched in a market to make sure that they're serious in that market. And now we have some great real-time data on where people are moving in the housing market. But what's important is not just looking at the amount of inbound migration at a given point in time, it's understanding how it's changing over time. Because for instance, in Miami or Las Vegas or Atlanta or Dallas, that level that we're seeing today, is it higher than it was a year ago? Is it lower than it was a year ago? That's really what we need to know to understand the future direction of home price. And the concerning trend for the US overall, and particularly these Sunbelt markets overall, is that we're seeing a decline in the number of people looking to move there and buy a home. Just take a look at this article. This is a Redfin article from October 29th titled, 30% of home buyers look to move metros in the third quarter, the lowest share since 2020. Interest in relocation fell for the second straight quarter as life continued to return to normal following pandemic lockdown. And if we scroll down to this graph, we can see Redfin showing basically the share of home buyers searching outside of their city, looking to buy a home in a new city over the last couple of years. And we can see that before the pandemic, it was around 26%. 26% of searches on Redfin were people looking to buy a home outside their city. That then jumped during the pandemic, reached a high of 31.5% in the first quarter of 2021. But that has since declined now a couple times in a row to 30% in the third quarter of 2021, the lowest level in a year. Now, what this shows is that the amount of people looking to buy a home in a new city is still higher than it was pre-pandemic, but now we're on a downward trajectory. We have already passed the peak of people looking to move, looking to flee, let's say lockdown states. We've already passed the peak of that. We're now heading into a downtrend in the number of people looking to move and buy a home in a new city. And this is extremely important to understand, right? If you are in a Sunbelt housing market and you're saying to yourself, we're just going to have a continued trend of people moving in, it's never going to end. Well, no, it's already slowing down. It's already ending. Particularly in certain cities, in certain markets, we're just seeing a massive drop-off in interest in home buyer demand from people moving in. One such market is Dallas, Texas, where we can take a look at the net inbound flow of people looking to buy homes in Dallas from Redfin. We can see that prior to the pandemic, it was at plus 4,500. 4,500 more people looking to move into Dallas than move out and buy a home. And then this figure quite legitimately rocketed up during the pandemic. It more than doubled through the first quarter of 2021 to plus 9,200. But then over the last 6 months, it's plummeted to plus 4,600, a 50% decline. And basically now in Dallas, we're seeing the same levels of inbound home buyer migration demand that we saw prior to the pandemic. That's right. So according to this Redfin data, Dallas is now back to pre-pandemic levels of migration home buyer demand. That we're now back to early 2020 levels of people from California, let's say, or people from New York wanting to move to Dallas. And that's going to make you very concerned about the Dallas housing market, because we're now back to 18 months ago of external demand, but yet home prices are 30% higher. Home prices are 30% higher, and we had a 30% increase in the amount of single-family home permitting and building. So we have way higher prices, way more permitting and building, but now that external demand has dropped down to pre-pandemic levels. A similar but not as exaggerated situation occurred in Phoenix, where we can see that prior to the pandemic, we were around plus 8,800 people looking to move to Phoenix. Then that vaulted up to plus 12,000 looking to move and buy a home. And then that has now declined for 2 consecutive quarters to plus 10,000, which is still an elevated level in Phoenix, but is now getting back to kind of the early 2020 level. Just as home prices in Phoenix are up by 40% in that span, and we've also had a big increase in home building in Phoenix. Similar situation in Las Vegas, where we had, again, this big uptick in relocation demand. We could see through the second quarter of 2021, and then a big drop off in the third quarter, again, back to close to the pre-pandemic levels. If you guys are enjoying this real-time migration data, make sure to hit the like button. On this channel, I really endeavor to bring you guys the most real-time data on the US housing market so you can make a more educated decision. Understanding migration trends is a big part of that decision. If you appreciate that, make sure to hit the like button. That will help get this video out to more people. But then potentially the most concerning of them all is Atlanta. Atlanta, where we had a pretty incremental increase and then, wow, substantial drop off actually to plus 4,800, which is even lower than the levels we saw in 2019. Dallas, Phoenix, Vegas, Atlanta, these are metro areas where if you're counting on, if you're banking on all these people moving in to support the housing market, don't count on it. Don't bank on it, because this real-time data from the amount of people looking to buy homes on Redfin is saying demand has gone way down. Expect this to spill over into the housing market inventory, into home prices very, very soon. Now, in a second, I'm going to show you a couple cities where the opposite is happening, where migration is continuing to go up, home buyer demand is continuing to increase from external sources. I'm going to show you those cities in a second, but first, I just want to talk about, why this is occurring. Why are we seeing a downturn in the amount of people wanting to move to, say, Dallas? And it's because of this. Migration is cyclical. If you look at 30 years of historical migration trends across America, you will see very clearly that there's, upticks in migration, say over 3 or 4 years, and then there's downtrends in migration over 3 or 4 years. And that when we see a surge in the amount of people moving to a certain part of the country, that's never going to sustain itself. Eventually, it's going to peter out, whether it's for economic reasons, whether home prices and rents become too high and, force people to move. It's not a sustainable proposition to continue to see more and more people just flooding in. And this is just really important to understand, because it shows you that you cannot just rely on external demand in your housing market, and that ultimately it's locals, it's the local economy, people who've lived there for a long amount of time, who earn those local wages, have those local jobs. They're going to dictate where the housing market goes, because inevitably, as we're seeing that external rush of people moving in from other parts of the country, it's not sustainable. It's going to go down. And then the burden of supporting a market with high prices is going to fall on the people that have lived there for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And then at that point, what do you think is going to happen to prices? Now, as I said a second ago, not all cities in America are seeing this big decline in migration. There's certain areas that are continuing to see an uptick, one of which is Miami. Look at this, everyone. Miami is seeing a huge surge over the last couple quarters in the amount of people moving there and looking to buy a home. We were around, 2,800 prior to COVID. Then we went up to 4,000. Now we're at plus 12,000. So Miami, quite legitimately, is still within kind of its major, let's just say, bubble of people looking to move there. Tampa is another place where the migration levels are still very elevated as well. Tampa, Florida, we went from about plus 4,000, plus 5,000, all the way to plus 8,000. We can see we've kind of topped at this point in Tampa. We had a slight decline in the most recent quarter, but the levels are still elevated. This data is consistent with what we know about Florida's housing market, and it's the tightest in the country right now. Miami, Tampa, Sarasota, Cape Coral, all of these areas have had a big influx of migration and very low inventory as a result. And so this is great, right? For current Florida real estate investors, current Florida homeowners, you're loving this influx of migration, the low inventory. The thing is, don't bank on this continuing. Just like we saw in Phoenix, just like we saw in Dallas, we had a run up in migration and a decline. We're going to see the same thing happen in Florida. And as great as maybe Ron DeSantis might be in terms of his economic policies and bringing people to the state, ultimately, the affordability of Florida, home prices and rents going higher is going to cause less and less people to want to move there, more and more people to move out. That's just a simple fact. So get ready for a drop off in Florida in the next 3 to 6 months. Now, so far we've talked about markets which, have seen a higher level of inbound migration overall and whether that migration declined or went up. But what about the cities that we're seeing the exodus, right? The cities that we're sending all of these people to Florida and Texas. How are they doing? What are the cities with the biggest outward migration in America right now? Let's take a look. Now, we're looking at the same data from Redfin on this graph, just looking at the markets that are having the biggest outbound search. So these are basically people in these cities, people in these markets. More people are looking to move out than there are people looking to move in. And we can see, oh boy, San Francisco just jumps off the page. Minus 61,000 in the third quarter of 2021. San Francisco, make no mistake, is still hemorrhaging people, is still losing people. Minus 61,000 is more than San Francisco had leaving a year ago during the height of the pandemic, which is crazy to think about. Los Angeles is another metro area that is still hemorrhaging people as well, minus 38,000. And you can see here, kind of by the virtue of both LA and San Francisco on this list, many people are still looking to leave California. Then we have New York. New York minus 30,000. New York obviously had a big hit from the pandemic, but as we'll see here, New York is actually rebounding a little bit in terms of its migration levels. New York was around minus 30,000 prior to the pandemic and then went to minus 50,000 during the height really of the pandemic from mid-2020 to mid-2021. Now New York seems to be rebounding a little bit. Yes, it's still losing people, but it's not losing as many people as it was a year ago. Los Angeles is the opposite. Los Angeles is continuing to see people move out, right? We see minus 16, minus 17,000 prior to the pandemic, and then just a continual flow of people out of Los Angeles. One reason explaining this is that actually home prices in New York got cheaper. During the pandemic, many areas of Manhattan saw a 10-15% decline in home prices. Rents went down. Potentially that enticed people back to New York City, whereas in Los Angeles, home prices just kept going up during the pandemic, potentially pushing more and more people out of the city even today. And just quickly heading back to this graph, I want to touch upon some of the cities with smaller declines. Denver and Seattle. These are two markets I know a lot of you are interested in. I think a lot of you would be surprised to know that these cities actually have net outbound. More people are looking to leave Denver and Seattle and buy a home than more people are looking to move in. So something to know. Denver and Seattle I have pretty high on my bubble list. We're seeing more people want to leave those cities and buy homes elsewhere than move in. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. It's pretty data intensive. As I've talked a lot about on this channel, understanding migration trends is very, very important in understanding the direction of your housing market, whether prices are going to go up or down in the future. The thing that most people fail to understand about migration though is that it is cyclical. It is not consistent. It is not linear. We're not going to just continue to see an uptick in migration in a market forever. Eventually, it's going to dip as prices and rents get too expensive. Less people are going to want to move there. More people are going to want to move out. And that can be a big problem in a market that's all of a sudden building way more homes. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, I just request that you do one thing. Please make sure you've hit that like button. If you already hit it, don't undo your previous like. But if you hadn't, hit that like button. That's the main way that you can help me get these videos out to more people, spread this data to more people, and support my channel, is just smash that like button. I would really appreciate if you could do that. Additionally, make sure you're a subscriber. I come out with 3 of these data-driven videos per week. I know you guys are going to like this content, especially as the housing market continues to turn and soften. Migration goes down, inventory goes up, prices go down. You're going to want the updates on all of this, which I'm going to provide you on this channel. Also, make sure to turn on subscribe notifications. Another thing you might want to do, particularly if you're someone who really likes the data and you want more more data, maybe on your housing market in particular, maybe I don't cover your housing market in these videos, think about becoming a Reventure channel member. You hit the join button below to do that. The cost is $5 a month. In return, you get an exclusive monthly newsletter, which shows you all of the data on the US housing market more broadly and then on a market by market basis, so you can understand whether your city is a buy, whether your city is a sell, how much are wages and jobs going up, how much home building there is. All of that's contained in this newsletter, so you can make a more educated decision on where and when to buy a home or investment property. As I said, you can hit the join button below. If you don't see the join button, there's a link in the description where you can join and become a channel member and gain access to this newsletter. All right, everyone, until next time, this is Nick from Reventure Consulting signing off.